Warning: the episode you are about to listen to most likely contains graphic language, details of violence and murder, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 21 of Murder with My Mother.
21, damn, girl.
Can't even believe that. That's my new line's back again. Didn't use it for a while.
Got nothing good to say, so we're just gonna recycle the old shit.
Well, I actually can't believe it because how did we get to 21? Like, that's crazy.
I don't know. Soon people will discover us for the first time, and they'll have to scroll through like pages and pages and pages and pages of podcasts.
of 21 pages of podcasts. So we are back with episode 21. And we got a good one today.
We do have a good one, but before we get to that, I'd like to break a little news here and there.
Oh, what's your news?
Well, it's actually your news. So my lovely daughter, Danica, decided that she would make me a grandmother again.
Yeah, Murder with My Mother. There's actually a small daughter. Well, I don't know if it's a daughter, but that'd be a change.
Would be nice, actually. So Danica already made me a grandmother in 2012.
Yes.
So I've been waiting for
10 years.
Quite a long time for it to happen again.
Yep.
And I've been anxiously waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting.
Yeah, so if I've sounded a little tired for the last 12 weeks, that is why. Because I have this little bean that's draining all my energy. So.
Yeah, and when we canceled a couple weeks ago and postponed for a week, it's because she was just feeling too gross to get out of bed. So
too gross to do anything.
Now, I guess maybe you guys could be like a little understanding of why we were flaky that week, but she was also kind of bitchy at that point also, so I was actually kind of relieved when she postponed. But she's taking a turn for the better, and
it's definitely a female.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. I thought your brother was a female and you were a male, so
well, I mean,
if you have your mother's intuition, you're screwed.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's just the bitchiness that's been like, oh, I'll say something and then be like, damn, girl, like you need to chill. And yeah, that's not my normal. So
yeah, so that's exciting news for us, and hopefully by the time the baby's born, will it still be considered a COVID baby? It was made during COVID,
yes,
but hopefully some shit's gonna relax pretty soon, because as it is right now, her partner can't even go with her for an ultrasound or anything like that. It's only the mothers that are allowed to do any of that stuff by themselves, and
yeah, even anything like the ultrasounds, the checkups. I mean, good thing he's not as, aware of what goes on at that, and I can just update him. So, that's okay. But, yeah, it would be nice to have him there. But, again, hopefully we're towards the end of this thing. So, yeah.
We've had some, in British Columbia, we moved into phase 2 yesterday. Or I think it took place today, but they announced it yesterday. Mm-hmm. Nothing like not a lot of notice.
Yeah, so we're allowed interprovincial travel, so we can basically go throughout our own province, which is nice because we do have some nice spots in BC, and we have Maga that lives in Kelowna, so
yeah, and we haven't been able to see her for Christmas, so we're probably going to end up doing Christmas in July because she's still got all the presents at her house, and we still got your presents. So
yep.
Yeah, and then also I have a brother that lives in another province.
Well, he's not allowed to come.
Oh. And yeah, so it will be nice to be able to travel through our province this summer and see lake country and the mountains and everything, just because we are still not allowed to travel internationally and the borders to the US are even still closed.
They did say, though, that they probably will make an announcement in the next couple of days to when they're going to reopen the borders, but again, it will probably have to have like a vaccine passport and prove. They said something about electronic proof that you're vaccinated, and
it's because that fucking microchip they injected us with.
Yeah, I guess that's not enough.
The 5G. You just drive across the border and the 5G will kick in. You still only got the 4G.
The best ever is that my pregnancy bitchiness is like, okay, like I've talked about this on other episodes. I'm not like with the whole conspiracy, anti-vaxxers, like I have a lot of them on my Facebook that they just keep on coming out of the woodworks. But my bitchiness the last couple weeks has been like, oh fuck, like I want to comment on like every single post, and then I have to be like, no.
To
Like,
each their own. We all, I guess, realize our fears differently,
yeah.
and we all kind of think people are conspiring against us in different ways, maybe.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm the opposite. I like to always try to see the better. I mean, I'm sure people have picked up on that, where I'm trying to see the better in the situation. I don't want to think that our government is either putting microchips in us or some people are like, this flu was on purpose. They did this to us on purpose. Like if that's the case, I just want to live in denial because I don't want to I'm already an anxious person naturally. And trust me, these hormones are not helping with that. So,
yeah, well, maybe one day it'll all come out, but I doubt it ever will. I mean, we're still talking about whether aliens came to the Earth in the
they
60s,
for sure did. But another thing too, obviously, that that we talked about last time that we touched on, another thing about our government, and I mean, I don't know who had a hand in this. I think it was mostly the church. About the residential schools, they have gone to a few more locations, and unfortunately, they have found more graves. So I think that the number is almost 400 kids that they found. I'm not celebrating Canada Day this year because, like I said in the last episode, fuck you, Canada, for right now. But yeah, I will keep you guys posted. Obviously, it's not something that is very. I mean, now it's covered because we live in the day of social media, so you can't hide as much as before. Everyone's pretty much aware of what's going on. So I mean,
we're uncovering an atrocious genocide.
Yeah.
That we weren't aware of. Many of us were not aware of it. I'm sure that the Indigenous people have been aware of it the whole time, and they were the ones that lived it. And I'm glad that it's being brought out to our awareness so that we can definitely take the steps to make sure that nothing like this ever, ever, ever happens again. I mean, it's such an atrocity, and I feel very ashamed that my ancestors committed this atrocity.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's obviously, even just talking about it gets me, like, I get worked up. Like, you have to think, we still hunt Nazi war criminals. I believe that they should be on the same page. Like, again, hormones. I was watching some movies about it the other night and was getting so worked up because some of these people, if the last residential school closed in 1996, some of these people, okay, let's say the oldest nun there was like 60. They're probably like 90 years old.
Yeah.
Like, let's kill them. Like, I know that's obviously not rational thinking, but at the same time, like, that's just, I don't know. It's just so crazy that these people were allowed off scot-free. I can't even.
It's crazy that people are wandering the earth with that amount of evil within them.
Yeah.
Among us. Like, we talk about these killers and these terrible things that serial killers and everyone did, and we're putting them in a whole different category of deviant. And it turns out there actually are a lot more people that are capable of the stuff. And if you're killing children, that's fucked. Like, that's the level
just
of fuck.
because of what their ethnic background, right? Like, that's just trying to, literally they said, and it was like broadly, like it was like broadcasted, like take the Indian out of the child. Like, what the fuck's wrong with the Indian? Leave it alone. Like, leave the Indian and the
thing
child
is that this is the country that they had. Yeah. It wasn't our country.
Canada. It's like literally, that is literally.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the fact that we came here and we're.
I'm not we. I'm gonna identify as like I was in a. I don't know. I can't even. It makes me so mad. So
I know, but we still have to be aware that that's where we came from. Also, I mean, that is something that we have to remember. Like I said before, in order for it to never be repeated again.
Oh yeah.
Not that that's in you or I.
No, but I know.
However,
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean.
Now that we're in a fight with each other, we're gonna.
See my other side. I mean,
we're gonna lead into today's episode, and today's episode was requested by, I think, one of our most loyal listeners.
Yeah, Brent.
Brent BLB.
What's up, Brent?
And,
happy Thursday.
And we don't even know, Brent, if we're saying your name properly, but you never corrected me the other day, so I'm assuming that it is correct.
Yeah.
Mr. BLB.
Yes. So, like we were saying, I mean, there's people that walk the earth and are, a lot of the time we cover cases where people are like, oh my, some people are like, oh no, we knew this guy was creepy, or we knew this, they were out in the open, and oh yeah, I wouldn't put it past them, whatever. But this case is just, it's a case of obviously murder.
It is a case of murder, and it's a terrible, terrible, terrible loss of a young person.
Yeah, but it's all the stuff that happens after the murder and the taunting and just the games, like the cat and mouse game that this guy was playing. Like a lot of the time, obviously, when you kill someone, you kind of try to stay under the radar and you kind of try to fly. Most of the killers we cover, they're to themselves. Obviously, yeah, we have the trophies and we have the stuff like that. But this one was like, come and get me.
You're going to see with this case. Like, it's definitely a twisted, very convoluted and strange thing that happened, for sure.
Yeah, and it happened like half an hour away from where we live. So another local case for us.
So today we're going to cover the murder of Tanya Smith and the attempted murder of Misty Cockerill. And the person that tried to kill Misty and did end up killing Tanya is named Terry Driver, and he's otherwise known as the Abbotsford Killer. So that's the case we have for you today.
So we hope you guys enjoy it.
This case takes place in 1995, and the world was quite a different place back in 1995. I mean, you were only 3 years old, so you don't remember, but people didn't have cell phones and the internet and all of that kind of stuff. It was a much more innocent time, and at the same time, I think there was probably a lot of stuff going on that no one knew about. Like, everything was kind of still hidden out. And
It was even before really DNA and all that stuff was.
Yeah, I mean, used. I think it was kind of on the cusp of all of that stuff, for sure. So it was October the 13th, which just happened to be a Friday the 13th.
Which makes it extra creepy.
Yeah, It was 1995, and there were two girls that were best friends, Tanya Smith and Misty Cockerill, and they were 16 years old, and they had been to a party in a town probably about 45 minutes away from where they lived. So they went to a party in Surrey, which is a pretty big area in the Lower Mainland, and they lived in Abbotsford. And Abbotsford is otherwise known as the Bible Belt. There's more churches per capita than anywhere else, I think. Maybe even in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. And I think at this time it was more kind of where you went to, obviously if you're religious, it was the religious capital, but it was like where you went to get away from the city to like raise your kids and have like a wholesome upbringing. They call it like a bedroom city of Vancouver.
Yeah, and it had a lot of farming and stuff like that. Like
a lot of churches.
A lot of churches, a lot of agriculture. It still does. Like it's beautiful. It has a lot of rugged, wild wilderness. I guess I can't say that all in one sentence. And yeah, so unassumingly,
That's where you would feel safe, right? Yeah.
And Tanya's family had actually just moved out of town in Abbotsford. So her parents were really wanting to keep the kids safe and move them somewhere that they could have horses and they weren't subjected to the city that was basically starting to creep into Abbotsford at the time.
Yeah, and Abbotsford, I mean, later down the road did turn to be quite, not dangerous, but it was very like a gangland kind of later in the 2000s. It did start to get, so maybe they had some kind of idea like, oh, stuff's starting to happen that we're not liking, so they just moved their family further away.
Yeah, so they were staying the night at Misty's house and they had a curfew, so they went home after the party in Surrey, but Misty's parents weren't home yet, so they heard that there was a party a couple blocks away. A friend's birthday party was a couple blocks away. And since their parents weren't home, they decided, as 16-year-old girls will do.
Been there.
Or in your case, 14.
Yeah.
To go to this other party, and it was in walking distance, so they just left and started walking. And when they were walking, they were talking and laughing and having fun and saying, like, it's Friday the 13th. What if a crazed killer comes after us? And
yeah.
just kind of like ironically joking and creeping each other out. And then from a large hedge, bam!
Which is creepy enough.
Yeah. Out jumps this man with a baseball bat in his hand, and he says, "You bitches want a party?" And I have heard the interview with Misty Cockerill. She says he basically grabbed them both by the arm and dragged them through the hedge to the other side where there was a side yard that was grassy, and it was covered because the hedges were there.
Well, and Abbotsford is very rural, right? So there is a lot of space in between. Not so much these days. It is still very rural. It is very farmlandy, but it's very back and then those days I can just imagine that they were probably couple kilometers away from other people, right? So
yeah. So he had a baseball bat in his hand, and he told them to both take their clothes off.
That would be so creepy.
So Misty froze and didn't take her clothes off, and Tanya just did the opposite and started obeying him because he had a baseball bat and he was going to hit them with it.
Well, and until you're in that moment, which I mean, hopefully nobody ever has to. It does happen, but it's like you can't. That's not something you can prepare for. Do you know if you're gonna
fight or flight? You don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've been in situations before where I've just frozen.
Yeah, because you don't know, right? And you're so scared, and it's just something you can't prepare for that.
So he started to rape Tanya, and Misty kind of came out of her frozenness, and she saw the bat laying on the ground, so she hit him with the bat while he was sexually assaulting Tanya. But at that point, he wrestled the baseball bat away from her and began to beat her with it.
Well, and as much as women don't like to, I mean, obviously, a full-grown man, in comparison to a 16-year-old girl, is going to have a lot more strength, and good for her for trying, but again, that probably just pissed him off even more, right?
Yeah, and he was saying stuff like, "You're going to be sorry, bitch, and you're going to die," and she said he was taking home run swings at her head. Ugh. And she remembers up to 7 of the swings.
Yeah, like imagine counting that, right? Like poor Misty.
She said she was looking the yard they were in, she could see her school from. Yeah. And she was looking at her school thinking, is this going to be the last time I see my school? Like, it's just such a young girl.
Yeah. And your friend is being sexually assaulted right in front of you, so you probably in some aspect like almost turn off and focus on like survival, like that's because are you next? Is he gonna do that to you? It's so surreal to just happen all of a sudden. Some guy drags you into the bushes and rapes you, and
it's totally surreal. Like I hope I never experience something like that, and that has to be for the rest of your life if you survive an attack like that. It has to be so haunting.
Well, and you hear in some interviews Misty talk about just looking at Tanya, and that Tanya, I guess, had very big eyes, and she was a very expressive person, and just watching her, it was almost like she was just numb, just there, scared, obviously, right? Just being sexually assaulted. And I know that he had her on her hands and knees, so that's just, it's a lot for someone to take in. That's your best friend's being
assaulted right beside
and
you.
Subsequently, that's gotta be very, very traumatic.
So he beat Misty until she was unconscious. And when she woke up, I've heard 2 different things. I heard she woke up at one point and Tanya was laying beside her and she passed right back out again. And then I heard that she woke up and no one was beside her. That's what ultimately happened. So she got up, crazily enough, and was able to walk around, and she was looking for Tanya. They say she walked around for 5 hours.
That's crazy.
Looking for Tanya. And by the time she ended up wandering into the Abbotsford General Hospital, she had what was described as a fist-size hole in her skull, a broken arm, and a broken finger. And she had hypothermia because she'd been out walking around, and it was October for such a long time.
Well, and think if you have some big, large wound in your head, that's probably going to allow you to...
Well, she was bleeding and bleeding.
Yeah,
and bleeding
you're
too.
Losing blood, and you're, that's so sad.
So she walked into the hospital, and her injury was, especially her head wound, was life-threatening, but she was able to tell them that her friend was out there missing.
Yeah.
So she told her friend's name and that her friend was missing. And then she started to go kind of delusional, and she said that one of the nurses' husbands had done it and a bunch of like crazy stuff. But she did get the important message out that her friend Tanya was missing, so that the people in the hospital were able to call 911 and tell them what she had said before she was rushed into surgery. So the next day, so there's a city that is then about 30 minutes away from Abbotsford, and the name of that city is Chilliwack. And there's a river system. There's quite a few river systems that run through there, and one of the rivers is called the Vedder River, and it's very popular for fishing, especially in the fall when the fish are spawning, the salmon. So the Abbotsford police started to look for Tanya that night, but there was no luck. And that next morning, someone had gone to go fishing. Two guys went to go fishing, and they saw the body of a young female floating face down in the Vedder River.
In just a small amount of water, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like she was in
like
totally
13
submersed.
inches of water or something.
And her clothes were strewn all about on the top in trees and around her, and just like pretty much like, hey, I'm
like
here.
It was like someone wanted her to be found. So by that point, it had kind of gotten around to the Chilliwack police, obviously, that this was going on. So when they went down to the river, they brought a picture of Tanya and were able to identify her from
right at the scene.
Yeah. Terrible.
Which I think in a way is good that they were able to identify her right away, because, I mean, back, like you said, there was no cell phones, there was no internet. Nowadays, if a kid goes missing, it's on Facebook in 10 minutes, like, this kid's missing, or anything. So it was...
Or even Amber Alert. That didn't even exist.
No. So, I mean, it's good that obviously it's not good that this had happened, but it's good that they were able to identify her. And so they could, they knew that this was... because of Misty's story, that they knew that this person had been assaulted, this person had been, so they could collect the proper evidence to...
And oddly enough, someone ended up calling the news right when they were finding the body. Someone called the news, and reporters showed up right away. So this case was very much in the public eye right from the beginning, because someone kept tipping off.
Someone, yes.
Yes, kept tipping off the journalist. There were a few things and details about the body that the police kept as holdback evidence.
Yeah, which is, we always cover that in cases. It's much better, because then they know. It's only the killer that's going to know that.
And one of the things that they kept was that there was a bite mark to the right breast of Tanya. And no one really would have known that.
No, because it was just the police. They never released that.
Yeah, so the police were about that day, or a couple days later, I think, setting up a tip line.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just in the beginning of stages of setting it up, and
Oh.
So the lead investigator answered the phone, and a man had called in and said that he had driven Misty to the hospital. Which
is weird, because she was walking around for hours and hours.
Yeah, she had hypothermia, so that was...
And wouldn't you walk her in and be like, excuse me, I found this girl, she's bleeding everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, if I were to find a teenager especially, anybody, if I were to find someone in that condition, I would probably assist them inside,
Yeah, or like just call 911 when you saw them.
Yeah.
So the police tried to get him to come in and talk to them, because they thought that was weird, and they pretty much knew it was bullshit, because she had been walking around for so long. And the caller hung up.
Yeah. And the detective said he could hear a train in the background, which I think back in the day you'd have to pretty much rely on what the surroundings were to know where someone was. I mean, they could track the call, but...
Well, they did track the call, and not that call, because they didn't realize it was important, but... The fact that a train was so clearly in the background
kind of narrowed it down.
Yeah, kind of narrowed it down that it was probably a call made from outside also. And you have to remember, like, back in those days, we still had payphones.
Yeah.
Everywhere. I miss payphones.
Me
actually
too.
a lot.
Yeah.
Like, Now when your cell phone dies, you're fucked,
Oh
basically.
yeah. Well, there's charging stations everywhere, so not really.
There
But
is?
yeah, everywhere.
What if you
Where you
forget
been?
what if you forget your phone at home, like
Well
I always
then,
do?
geez, then you're just hooped.
Then I need a quarter and a payphone. Anyway, so the next day after that, the same caller called back, and we have a recording of that call. Super creepy.
You know who I am. Tanya's right. Tasted really good.
So if you didn't catch that, the caller says, because very poor sound quality, fucking payphones. But so the caller says, "I just want you to know who I am."
I'm the killer.
Yeah.
Tanya's right nipple tasted so good.
Which is like the creepiest thing you could probably hear.
So, da-na-na-na.
Yeah.
It clearly was the killer because no one else knew about the bite mark.
So that probably just sent the police into like a hysteria because they were like, oh my god, like that's when they sent the police. They tracked the call.
They tracked the call to a payphone, and it was right across the street from an ice arena, and they sent a forensics team there to dust the payphone for prints.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple hours later, someone called 911, not the tip line, and said, "You guys did a real thorough job, but did you think I would be so stupid to leave fingerprints behind?"
This guy's a fucker. Like, he's obviously just taunting, and obviously it gets worse and worse and worse.
And then he calls back 20 minutes later and says, "Are you having trouble finding the killer?" And the dispatch officer from 911 says,
like,
"Did you want to provide information to the police?" "No, I'm the one. I'm giving you a chance to try and find me. I'll be cruising around looking for someone else. And just so you know who I am, Tanya's nipple tasted really good." And the dispatcher asked, "And what is your name?" And then the killer hung up.
So it's like obviously he wants to taunt them, but he obviously doesn't want to be caught for it, which is like, make up your mind. Mom, you got a dog. A big dog, too.
I do. He's pretty big. He's over 100 pounds.
Do you ever take him anywhere and get, like, super stinky and, like...
Every single, at least second day.
Well, good. I'm glad I'm not alone, that my dog likes to roll in the stinkiest stuff at the park. So, for those long, stinky car rides home, I just started using Sense dog dry shampoo.
I also started using it, and it's awesome.
It's a lifesaver. So,
it is.
Sense. They're on Instagram, Facebook, and go to www.fursense.ca.
So in the meantime, Misty had made it through surgery, and they had to move her to another hospital, which was specializing in intensive care and repairing her brain and all of that stuff. She had to have holes drilled in her skull because her brain was swelling so badly.
You hear of that with really bad cranial injuries. Like, the brain swells so much because that's what happens when your body's trying to protect itself. It had a huge trauma happen to it. So
when she woke up, every time she would wake up, there would be detectives sitting by her bed, and eventually she was well enough, pretty early actually, to help the...
She's a strong girl for sure.
She helped the forensic artist do a sketch of the perpetrator.
And I know that the whole time she was in the hospital, I think up until Tanya's funeral, they didn't tell her that Tanya had passed away. Because she kept asking, because that's obviously... You have to think, before she was injured like that, that's all she was witnessing was her friend being sexually assaulted. So that's big on her mind. And so she kept asking, "Where's Tanya? How is she?" And they were like, "Oh, she's in another part of the hospital." And they weren't telling her the truth because obviously...
They wanted her to pull through.
Yeah.
So she did the sketch with the sketch artist, and...
That's the ugliest sketch.
I know.
It's the ugliest man
we'll
I've ever seen.
We'll put a picture of the sketch on, maybe on the Instagram page. And it was, the guy in the sketch was like very narrow-faced and dark-haired and balding, kind of like, looked like a creepy killer, really.
Yeah, well, fitting, I guess.
So about a week later, Tanya's family had the funeral.
But they didn't know that this creepy fucker who was, because again, they have the sketch, but they don't actually know what he looks like. He was actually at the funeral. So that's super creepy, but you do hear that it's very common, especially these cocky ass killers, the ones that are like, catch me if you can, but you can't. Like, the balls and the audacity he had to go to the family's funeral that they're holding for their daughter when you are the one that just brutally killed her. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, and the police make a practice of videoing
Everybody that goes.
the funerals.
Because they know
this
it's
is
so
a very
common.
common thing that happens.
Well, because people that are, you have to think, if you kill someone and they have holdback evidence, they have all that stuff that they only are keeping between the police. But if you're looking for maybe just a tidbit of information or something like that, and you want to actually, because you hear when people are missing a lot of the time, that the killers will go with them, like go into the search parties or go to the
this is Disturbed.
Well, because they interject themselves into an investigation on purpose.
Ugh, so weird.
Not if you're lying cunt though. Then,
well, I don't know. Well, that's all still unfolding.
Yeah.
So on Halloween, they hadn't heard from him since a couple days after the murder. And on Halloween, he made another phone call from a payphone that was just outside of a sports bar. And he was repeating everything he would said before. But he was saying that...
he was saying with more detail now, right? Like, this is what I did.
Well, he was actually saying that Tanya wasn't his first victim and she wouldn't be his last victim. And he was saying a lot of detail about what he would do to his next victim.
And obviously the police have no reason not to believe him right now because you don't just... It's very rare that you just jump to doing that to two girls walking on their own. You're not just going to get the balls all of a sudden to do that. So they probably were very worried because it does seem like... And in the valley, which Abbotsford is in something we call a valley, it's not far... It's very... on the highway, so it's not far. Because so do they know if he's murdered or assaulted in other jurisdictions, and now that he's saying like, this isn't my first time, like obviously they're gonna believe him.
So the police were so worried about it that they actually, and I remember this so well, they set up like a phone line that you could call, and we used to call it. Like, we thought that the guy in the picture looked like our friend Margaret's husband, Mike.
Oh my God.
It looked exactly like him. So we were always like, oh my God, I think Mike's the Abbotsford Killer. But he was like, I don't know, he wasn't the killer type, but whatever. Anyway, so
poor Mike.
Yeah, my friend Sandy and I always used to say, like, I think it's Mike. Like, he looks like, should we call? I think someone actually did. I think two people actually did call on Mike. Because he looked like just like the sketch.
That's crazy.
So, like I was saying, they set up this phone line that you could call into and you could listen to the voice of the killer, and they edited out some of the holdback information, but they had his voice saying stuff. And then you call the tip line. If you think it sounds like Mike, then call the tip line and report that it's Mike. But so that's how worried they were about it.
That's very smart, though, because think about it. Your voice is like a signature. Like, people's voices are not usually the same. It's very rare. I mean, unless you're you and I. So
yeah, we do sound quite a bit alike. But
yeah, like if you're, say, like a family member or a friend or a wife or something, a child even, if he had old enough children to be like, oh my God, that sounds like my dad, or that sounds like this person.
And if you think about it now, like, look at, for instance, the Trina Hunt case that is happening that we're obsessed with right now, getting justice for Trina. The police aren't really letting go of any of their evidence right now. Like, they're not... It was different back then. Like, they must have had more, and this guy was, like, way more showboaty. But they were releasing a lot of stuff, and they were actually even releasing stuff like telling people to be careful and stuff like that. Whereas now I find that investigations tend to take more of a, like, oh, don't panic the public stance.
I don't like, because I've said before in other episodes, I would rather be aware and be alert and
like a little too scared than just be fucking like, oh, well, I might get bit by a coyote in Stanley Park, but no one's killing anyone, when there are people raping people. Like, I don't know. Obviously, the police are right? The police are doing an important job, and they know what's best.
Oh, do they?
But yeah, so
in this case, they did a great job because they did warn the public.
Yeah, this was like one of the cases that we've done where the police were the most
they actually
communicative.
Did their fucking job, yeah.
And so Misty was actually able to identify the voice of the man that attacked her and killed Tanya.
Say, that
was him.
Yeah.
So there's a radio station in Abbotsford and called Radio Max Station, and I don't think it's still playing, but no one had heard from the killer after that last phone call that was Halloween, so about 4 months.
Well, they actually, in between that, they arrested someone that looked like the sketch.
Yeah.
And he was in custody for 2 months until they could clear him because they did have DNA from Tanya.
That was the other holdback evidence they had was DNA. They had DNA both on the bite mark and DNA inside of her from the killer's semen. Yeah. And that actually surprised me that like back in those days they could get that kind of DNA from a body that had been in the water.
Well, I think actually because if you revert back to the Green River case, that's why Gary Ridgway was caught, because he would ejaculate inside them and then he would put rocks and stuff.
Yeah.
But you have to think a vagina is it's a closed orifice, right? So if something gets up in there, I think it's just good that they knew to look for that DNA, especially because she had been in the water, but she wasn't submerged in the water.
Oh, that's true. She was in a shallow amount.
Yeah. So I think that obviously worked in the favor of the investigation when it came to the DNA evidence.
So as we're saying, then they've arrested another man and
for 2 months.
For 2 months, and he wasn't really a poor guy because he had been charged with sexual assault and stuff in the past. But they kept that hush-hush. But in that time that they had arrested that guy and they were waiting for the DNA and stuff to come back, they had no more calls from the killer. So
that's why the police thought it was their guy.
Yeah, they thought that for sure. And then they had a forensic odontologist and the DNA. So the bite mark was checked and it did not match. And the DNA also did not match. So they knew.
Odontology, it's not 100% science, because I've watched episodes of Forensic Files where there was a guy, it was called the Snaggletooth Killer, because this guy had a snaggletooth. And this guy did I want to say 12 years in jail because they thought it was him. And then it wasn't. It was a guy with the exact same snaggletooth that he had, which is so, God. Can you imagine? So this poor guy.
I would have been screwed before braces.
Yeah, right? So, well, now think about it. If you have braces and other people have braces and your teeth all look the same.
Yeah. So once that killer was ruled out,
that killer.
Yeah.
He's not a killer, but.
The suspect was ruled out. He might be a killer. Just didn't get caught yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, once that suspect was ruled out, the real killer put in a phone call to the Radio Max station in Abbotsford and said that he was the killer and told them to go outside and look, that he left a surprise.
Wait, first wasn't there, because didn't they actually have a psychologist come in and help them before, because they did an article saying, oh, this guy moved out of the city, he's no longer here, because they were actually trying to bait him?
I don't
remember. That actually happened first. Okay. So before he called the radio to say, hey, motherfuckers, basically creepy, the killer, whatever, they had someone come in because they knew, because of his contact to the police already, obviously.
He was attention seeking?
Yes. And so they got a psychologist to help them write an article saying, oh, this killer isn't here anymore. He's moved on. Everybody, it's okay. Don't worry. And obviously, as we know, he liked to cause fear and panic, and because it's a control thing, obviously.
It's a power thing, especially from, the things he's saying, like, I'm the one.
Yeah, but the shit that he did at the radio station is fucking weird and creepy, and
So he did this call and told the DJ to go and look outside. And the DJ went and looked outside on his car.
The Max, it was literally what's it called? Max?
It's the Max radio station, the station car that was, wrapped with all of the logo and everything. And Tanya's family had this beautiful headstone made with her picture on it. Mm-hmm. And the fucker had actually stolen her 190-pound headstone from her grave and dropped it on the hood of
the passenger side of the hood of the car
of the
DJ Max car. But to be hey, you think I'm not here anymore? Obviously the article that they wrote got his attention, but again, to go so out of your way. Like, you're victimizing.
Well, and this was midday.
Yeah, and you're victimizing the family all over again. They just had this beautiful service for obviously a horrible loss, and they, had this nice headstone. And I think that a lot of the community actually pulled together to go to the funeral, to go to the the service, and everybody felt this because, again, how scary is it that 2 girls were targeted out of nowhere
in this
so
little
brutally?
Community.
Exactly, when everyone's religious, and it's like, so that's just Jesus. So, yeah.
Anyway,
so brazen.
He defaced the headstone also. So
yeah, he wrote some weird shit on it.
He wrote in felt pen, she was not the first. He also wrote, she won't be the last.
Like shit that would scare the fuck out of the community. And
he wrote, I'm still looking. You won't find me. And then he also wrote, one day, Misty.
He also had yummy tit on there, too.
Yeah, and with an arrow pointing to Tanya's chest.
Ugh.
So he was feeding off that attention after that, and he called again 2 days later and just kept...
From a payphone, obviously.
Just kept saying, Tanya won't be the last one. But this time, the police went to the payphone that the call was made from, and someone had seen him and was able to give a description of him and the vehicle that he drove.
And I think that because they said that he had red hair, remember? Yeah. So I think that obviously is going to narrow it down. Now they can add to the sketch because they kept releasing sketches based on tips they were getting.
Misty was giving sketches, but you have to remember, like, she had a brain injury. Yeah. So her memory was not of someone with red hair. It was, it was Mike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
poor Mike.
And so a few days later, a woman called the 911. So she was a random woman just sitting in her house, and someone threw a wrench through her front window, and it had an envelope taped to both sides of it. And on the front of the envelope, it said, from the killer, call 911 on one side. And on the other side, it said, from the Abbey killer, call 911. So good thing she didn't touch it. She just called 911.
But you know what is another good thing is all these stupid fucks that use tape, that tie people up with tape. I mean, unless you have gloves on, a lot of stuff gets stuck to tape. So.
And another thing is, if you've ever touched that tape before, like you're using the same roll of tape, not that I want to give anyone tips, but if you're using the same roll of tape that you used last Christmas to wrap your kids' Christmas presents with, your fingerprints are going to be on that fucking tape.
And not even just fingerprints, sometimes hair,
look at tape.
Carpet fibers, and all of that stuff now, because DNA, obviously 1995, a fingerprint was the jackpot, which they did find on the tape.
Yeah, so he was getting a little sloppier because they found a fingerprint on the sticky side of the tape, and
it had like pictures of Misty in it, right? That said she's lucky to be alive, like just so blatantly.
So inside the envelope was a newspaper picture of Misty with the words, lucky to be alive, written across her forehead, as well as a picture of Tanya. And also included was a long letter confessing to the rape and murder of Tanya Smith and the assault on Misty Cockerill, as well as 3 other assaults that had just occurred in Abbotsford.
And they knew because they were reported. So they knew that these were actually legit assaults that had happened.
So the letter said, hello, it's me. Yes, sirree. Hello, it's me. Yes, sirree. Tanya's right nipple sure did taste good. By the way, Tanya was wearing sandals that night that I threw, and I threw them with the other stuff. The letter goes on to describe the attack in detail, as well as other conquests, and ended in another taunt. Bye, guys. This is the last you'll hear from me. Till next time, good luck.
Like, he gets a rise out of taunting, because you have to think, most of the time people take souvenirs and trophies and stuff, and that kind of gets them off, obviously, but just the fact that he kept interjecting to let them know and saying creepier and creepier stuff every time.
And he was saying stuff like, by now the holdback evidence was out because he kept saying it and writing it and whatever. But in this letter, he wrote things that only someone that had done these other 3 assaults would have known. So one of them was the assault on a 12-year-old girl that he had groped, but she got away. Mm-hmm. The second victim was attacked from behind and struck in the head and knocked her out. And the third victim was actually an inpatient at a mental illness facility.
And her backpack was found up on top of the roof, right?
Well, and he said that in the
Mm-hmm.
letter. So he made some
Obviously, they went and
derogatory remarks about that woman and said she was indigenous and a bunch of other rude stuff. And then he...
But all of that stuff is pointing to, okay, this guy
Totally.
is actually legit. He actually did do these things.
And then he said that he had thrown her backpack on a roof of a body shop, and that's actually where it was found. So
Yeah, so he obviously was being serious.
yeah, so they knew now, like, this is even getting more and more serious because he said all this stuff that's actually happened. But also inside the envelope, he included clippings from the Vancouver Sun on the unsolved murders of 3 women.
Yeah, 3 of them were working girls, right?
Yeah.
In Vancouver.
So 2 of them were, or one of them was a working girl, a sex worker. And one of them was killed at her father's Richmond office while she was arranging a surprise wedding anniversary for her parents.
This guy's a fuck.
And another one was attacked while getting off the bus. And they were all stabbed to death in 1989. So this is crazy. Crazy,
and again,
crazy,
so
crazy.
why would the police, because he's already killed one and then taunted the police, ripped off the fucking headstone, like thrown it in a car in the middle of the day, thrown something through someone's window, like why would they not believe him?
Like, he's so brazen. Like,
Yeah.
this is like unheard of stuff. Like, this
Yeah.
is crazy. Ironically, a man and his mother ended up calling into the tip line to the police, saying that they believed the voice on the tapes was actually the man's brother and the woman's son. And the name of that man was Terry Driver.
So Donald was the name of the brother. So Donald Driver. He pretty much said that he remembered his brother talking about that he went to the funeral, which if you think about it and you're just a member of society that's worried, like, you know, we would probably go to something like that if it's a really big thing. But he said that right after the funeral, they got in a fight. Him and his brother, they got in an argument. And he said, like, don't fuck with me. You don't even know me anymore. You don't know what I'm capable of doing, which ding, 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 like neon flag. So I think that also
his past also, right? So,
well, yeah. And so I think being someone's brother, you know what they're capable of, you know their voice, and things probably started to click, like, okay, why did he go to this funeral? And because he was like married with children.
Yeah, so it was found out that he went to the funeral with his 2 children who were 3 and 4 years old.
Yeah.
And later on, once the police knew who he was, they found video of him at the funeral.
Yeah. So after the brother called and the mom, they actually brought Terry in. They checked his fingerprints, and what do you know? It was a match to the fingerprint that they found on the tape that was on the wrench.
And Terry didn't think it was going to be a match because he didn't realize that he'd left that fingerprint. So he gave no permission for DNA to be taken, but he went in with his lawyer for questioning and was like, okay, you can take my fingerprints, but you have to destroy them right away after you take them.
Well, and they actually had a lot of evidence against him that he didn't know, because I think, again, at that time, you're not as aware of what kind of things can be used against you, right? It wasn't as well known as it is today. Obviously, yeah, okay, if you rape somebody and you leave your DNA inside them, you should probably clue in that they could use that against you.
But like we always go back to over and over and over is
They
killers
think they're invincible.
they think they're invincible.
Yeah. So at the time of the attack, Terry was 31 years old, and again, like we said, he was a married father of 2. So we always talk about, like, wonder if the wife, you know, being married to someone like that, if you had any idea. So he was actually a Boy Scout leader, and he was the son of a decorated former Vancouver police sergeant. So he was someone that, like, which I'm kind of like this, where if I had a police scanner, I would always probably listen to it, and that's what Terry did. So he would always, because you have to think, that makes sense, because he was always wanting to be in the know, always wanting to know what was going on with the investigation and keeping creepy.
And he was like seemingly one step ahead of everybody.
So that made sense because he was known to be a scanner chaser, right? Kind of listen to what they were saying and go and follow. And remember when you used to follow ambulances or police cars when we'd go places, when
I
we'd
don't
see a lot of
remember
them. Well, one time we pulled up and there was some guy on the porch with a gun and all the police officers had their gun drawn, and I don't think we've done that ever since.
that.
But
So Terry also had pretty much his mom said, like every single factor of the McDonald triad.
yeah.
So he was starting fires when he was a child.
Well, and imagine you're the son of a police officer who
Yeah.
probably is aware that
He was
this is...
uncontrollable as a child, like from the age of 2. He would threaten to kill his mom. He would start fires. He would abuse animals. They actually gave him up to a home for disturbed children when I think he was like 6 years old.
Yeah, so no
And
wonder.
they couldn't control him, so they gave him to another place. And by the time he was 11, it had completely wrecked his parents' marriage and they split up. And he was raised by his dad, who was a police officer. And that's where he got into the scanner chasing, because he turned his psychoticness about fires and stuff like that into listening and being obsessed with the police.
Yeah, and so came out later that he would make those calls, and then he would listen to like the, the hysteria of the police, like, oh, like, go here, go here, go here. That's why he was, again, like you said, always one step ahead of them. And most of the time, he had his kids with him.
Yeah.
So if he was caught at the scene, which he didn't really look like the sketch all that much, but he would have his kids with him, so no one would suspect, like, oh, that's just a guy with his kids. They're not thinking, though, that's the guy that murdered and is taunting us and is doing all these other things. So,
and actually, when he was arrested, everybody that was questioned said, there's no way it was him. Like, I think his family had lived through what he was like as a kid, and he was such a bad kid. But I don't think anybody else, like his neighbors, he wasn't like super social with his neighbors, but nobody that was questioned or like interviewed for the news or whatever thought that it could have been him.
Well, and he, as a kid, I think was diagnosed with things like ADHD, OCD, Tourette's syndrome, right? So he was unable to probably be on top of his behavior
Impulse
at all times,
control.
right? Yeah.
So, and his defense team brought that all up. So
after they matched the fingerprint, they arrested him because they had the evidence that they needed, and obviously, later on it would be the DNA evidence and all that stuff. But so Terry was arrested, and so his story, because he didn't want to obviously be linked to the murder, even though he's a cocky piece of shit and was taunting and taunting
well, and
and
he
taunting.
knew they were going to find a bunch more stuff now that they knew who.
So his story was, on the night of the 13th, when Misty and Tanya were attacked, he actually stumbled upon them after they had been attacked.
And he saw a guy running from the scene.
Yeah,
he said.
That's what he said. So he said that because the 2 girls were unconscious and one of them was naked, this was obviously because they now knew that his DNA was inside of Tanya. So he said, well, they were actually just laying there and one of them was naked and she had her legs spread, so I just took it upon myself to have sex with her unconscious body.
Because I couldn't help it because of my OCD and my Tourette's syndrome. I have no impulse control.
And okay, I'm sorry, I know people with OCD and Tourette's syndrome. I don't think that is just any kind of excuse. Like, that's...
It's not. He was reaching.
He's obviously reaching, yeah. So he said that he pretty much... She stopped breathing, so he panicked. And basically because he realized that he left evidence on a dead girl's body. This is what he's saying now, because he said that she stopped breathing. So he loaded Tanya into his car and then he drove Misty to the hospital. But after that, he drove to his favorite spot on the Vedder River and he just threw Tanya's body in.
Yeah, because now it came out that he was actually an avid fisherman on the Vedder River. So he would go there fishing with one of his workmates all the time. And when they interviewed his workmate, he was like, holy shit, man. Yeah. He freaking called me that morning and said that he was fishing and was telling me that there was a police scene there and everything.
Well, and
so
you think about it,
he
he's probably
was
the
there.
One. Yeah, and he's probably the one that called.
He was the one. He said he was.
He was the one that called the media so that they could come cover, because there was one guy who was in the media and he said it's weird that there were so many of us. It's like someone called every news station and was like, there's been a dead body discovered. So obviously, again, attention-seeking behavior. This guy was like, look at me, I'm killing people. Like,
he had all these different excuses, and each excuse that he used always led back to I was just trying to help. He finally admitted that he had accidentally killed Tanya because he thought she was dead when he was having sex with her unconscious body, and he didn't realize that she wasn't dead when he put her in the water, and he was really sorry for that, but he was really just trying to help. He kept saying, I was just trying to help. I was just trying to help when I called the police. All those... He had to admit to all the phone calls and the wrench and all of that stuff, and he kept saying, I was just trying to help. I was trying to keep it in the public eye. I was trying to help.
Well, and all the evidence that all his story, it didn't match the evidence that the police had, because he was saying, this and this, even about driving Misty to the hospital. They knew that no one drove Misty to the hospital. They knew she woke up at the scene where the attack happened by herself and then wandered looking for her friend in a obviously trauma-induced, head injury-induced, state. And she was walking for so long, so that's why she had the hypothermia. Yeah. That's why she had, they knew that none of this stuff happened. They knew that he wasn't being honest. They knew
he was fucking crazy with everything, even from having him on video at the funeral.
Yeah, and his defense team was very okay, they could see right through. They knew a jury was not going to be sympathetic to, I just because of my OCD and my Tourette's, I stumbled upon a naked girl and raped her.
But I mean...
And then I called and taunted the police for months and months.
Terry actually chose to have a trial just by judge instead of a jury because he thought, I think his defense team thought that would be better off.
Yeah.
Because all they had to do was instill a little bit of doubt that could have been the case, because he had such issues with OCD and ADHD and Tourette's syndrome, and he also had abandonment issues from his parents sending him to the home for disturbed children, and they had expert after expert after expert at the trial come up and testify about poor Terry. And even, this is the weirdest thing that I can't understand, and maybe Terry Driver's mother or brother Donald, if you're listening to this, you're still around. Why did you side with him later? They sided with him. First of all, they took the reward money for turning him in. Second of all, then they said they believed his story that he had just arrived at the scene and
just raped a helpless, unconscious girl. Yeah, that clearly one of them had a horrible head injury and they was probably bleeding everywhere.
They stood up for him in the media and everything. After, it's so weird because they just talked about what a shitty kid he was, and they called him scared.
Yeah,
they were scared of him. He threatened to kill his own mother for his whole childhood, and his parents gave him away because they were scared he was going to
he probably would have
burn down the house when they were all sleeping or something. He had this trial, and it was Judge Wally Opal.
He's my favorite.
He is my favorite too. He was the judge on the missing women's. Well, he does a lot for the missing women's.
Yeah.
But he was the judge on the Picton case also.
Yeah, and he was also he was he was actually I think he was just the minister of justice at the time, when actually a friend of mine was brutally attacked, and some of the guys that attacked him were seen laughing after their sentence and all this stuff, and he actually saw the video and was like, nope, these guys need to have harsher sentences.
Need to be,
So he's just a good all-around...
Yeah, he was a hard ass, for sure.
But you know what? I feel, and I've said this multiple times, Canada does not have a harsh justice system. It's for criminals, that it's about them and their recovery and their rehabilitation. It's not harsh enough to be look, motherfucker, you did a brutal crime, you committed this brutal crime, you deserve to be in jail for the rest of your life.
You chose to do this, so
even the sick fuck clause or whatever we always talk about, even the fact that existed is crazy.
Yeah, so Wally Opal said at the end of the trial, I simply cannot find the words to describe and depict your horrible crimes. You murdered Tanya Smith for your own sexual gratification, and you almost killed Misty Cockerill. They did nothing to provoke you. So he was found guilty of the rape and murder of Tanya and the assault on Misty. And in 2000, he was declared a dangerous offender. So he was receiving an indefinite sentence.
I know that at one point, I think it was in 2006, he was moved back to Abbotsford.
So what happened, actually, and this goes along with our justice system, is he was sent to a treatment center in 2006. And that was a big thing.
Well, honestly, even right now, I don't know if you guys remember, you must remember the Heather Thomas case.
Yes.
So that sick fuck, I don't even remember his name.
Shane
because,
Ertmode.
Oh, God, yeah. He actually, it's been in the news, just another part of our justice system, that he just got granted full, basically, day trips to go volunteer at some society.
Like, so
But it's
fucked.
like when you make the choice to brutally kill a 10-year-old girl, you should be in jail for the rest of your life. If you make the choice to murder one 16-year-old, just attack two 16-year-olds for no reason, for your own sick fucking pleasure, you should be in jail for the rest of your life. Not a treatment facility, not because if you could have been treated, it probably should have happened before you committed these heinous acts.
So he was moved back into prison. He was also charged with the 3 sexual assaults.
Good. Well, now that they had his DNA, they could probably link it all to them, right?
But in May of this year, like just last month, he had a parole hearing.
Ugh.
And Misty showed up, and he was not granted parole because he's at a very high risk to reoffend. They said.
Well, think about it. All the attention that he was seeking, like, that's almost like a drug in itself.
Well, he has a personality. He's a whack job.
Yeah, and I know that Misty Cockerill is. I mean, what is she now? Probably like a couple years younger than you.
Yep. So she's in her 40s and she's traveling around. She's in public speaking.
Yeah.
She's
an advocate,
restorative justice and stuff like that. She's an amazing person. I think I saw a sign. I think she's actually doing real estate now too.
Which is, I mean, good for her because the fact that she could do that heal through such a traumatic event, watching your best friend be murdered in front of you, watching, knowing that they were, I mean, obviously she didn't remember in the time and stuff like that, but I mean, just knowing that you did go through something like that and then being taunted and,
She was actually living, and this is pretty harsh for Canada, but they put her in witness protection, her and her family, when he was still out there, and that does not happen here.
No.
But Misty says she will not let this define the rest of her life.
Good for her.
And yeah.
The fact that she can publicly speak and defend, and carry Tanya's memory and say, this is not, even to define Tanya's life. It's not defined by this horrible, heinous way that you died. And that's what you and I like to really kind of hit home is obviously this happened and it's part of your story, but it's not all your story. And
it's a little tiny glitch at the end that takes you away from everyone that loves you.
And this sick fuck that had all that power and all that control and all that stuff, he no longer has that. Now he's going to just rot in jail for the rest of his life, hopefully.
So I don't really want to give this fucker any more attention right now. So we're just going to wrap it up. And we have had a long one today.
Yeah. But that was episode 21. So we hope you guys enjoyed listening to, again, the like Mom said, the psychopathy, the psychology behind why the fuck somebody would do that and just try to re-victimize, not even only Misty, but re-victimize Tanya's family, the community, because think of how scary that was, right? To live in a time in a community that you think is safe and very rural and family oriented and just a community, and then there's really a guy living amongst you that's even attending the funeral, like that's
just... But one thing we have to be grateful for is that his mom and his brother,
even though they switched back later,
but thank God they called, because who knows what would have happened. So we hope very sincerely that as things continue to open up and you have a lot of other stuff that you might find interesting to do in your life, that you'll still continue to give us a listen every second week, and we'll try to keep things as interesting. Brent BLB, I really hope that we did the story that you wanted to hear, the justice that you wanted to hear from it.
Yes. So again, everybody, reach out to us, Murder with My Mother Pod on Instagram, Murder with My Mother Podcast at gmail.com. If you guys want to leave any case suggestions, I know I've gotten a couple and we're going to sort through those, but again, we're always open. We started the list, so
I got one from my hairdresser Shauna, shout out to Shauna.
Woo!
That said, I want you to do this case, and then she wrote, oh wait, it wasn't a murder, ha 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 ha.
So that's probably one of the...
That's okay, Shauna, maybe you can think of another one. I know that you probably have a lot of good ideas, so hit me up, girl.
Yeah, so that was another episode of Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast where I talk murder with my mother.
This old bitch is about to be a grandma for the second time.
So I think by the time, I was going to say, I think by the time we do the next episode, you guys will know, I'm finding out the gender or the birth gender of my child. So yeah, we'll keep you guys posted on that. And hopefully I'm not feeling like a bag of assholes for much longer.
I think the smashed assholes feeling will go away pretty quickly, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll just be lucky and have it through the whole thing.
Woo, yeah, so.
Okay, well, everybody stay safe and go get your vaccination if you feel like it. And if you don't, then stay safe anyway. And we love you guys, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.